Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We are so delighted to have you join us for our Waterside Chat tonight. To begin, I want to remind everyone to please mute your microphones and to please keep them muted during the chat. We will be having a question and answer afterwards, and there will be time for Lee to answer any questions you may have. If you'd like to, feel free to write your questions in the chat window, and we will read them in the order they are submitted during the Q&A portion. Just to give you a little bit more about Water Spirit, for those of you who might not know, Water Spirit is one of several ministries in New Jersey established by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. We are a center of ecology and spirituality that informs, inspires, and enables all people to deepen their consciousness of the sacredness and interdependence of all creation, with a focus on water as critical in sustaining all life. Water Spirit presents a variety of programs, including weekly meditation sessions and seasonal equinox and solstice celebrations, and also advocates in partnership with others for clean, safe water for all and a just transition to renewable energy sources. Water Spirit is headquartered on occupied Lenni Lenape land in Rumson, New Jersey, and feel free to take a minute to share what native land you might be on. This is a nice tool to share in whatever meetings you attend. And today we are speaking with Lee Clark, who is the Environmental Justice and Policy Manager for New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. I'm going to give a little bit of background about you, Lee. You're a resident of Phillipsburg, and you received your bachelor's degree in political science and your master's degree in business communication from Rider University. Prior to Lee's current work with state and municipal environmental policy, Lee managed New Jersey League of Conservation Voters and Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania's bi-state volunteer ladder of engagement program within the Delaware River Watershed. Lee has also worked as the field director for New Jersey League of Conservation Voters Education Fund's Green in 17 campaign, which was an initiative to raise awareness around prominent environmental issues, including clean energy, clean drinking water, open space preservation, and environmental justice. Before joining the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters team, Lee worked in Pennsylvania on Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, coordinating canvasses, voter registration drives, phone banks, and volunteer recruitment. Lee also has local and state campaign experience, including Tom Malinowski's 2018 U.S. House of Representatives campaign, Bonnie Watson Coleman's 2014 U.S. House of Representatives campaign, and Senator Cory Booker's 2013 U.S. Senate campaign. Lee served on the Phillipsburg Town Council, becoming the first African-American councilman in the town's 158-year history, and served the Phillipsburg Housing Authority as a commissioner appointed by Governor Murphy in 2019. With unanimous freeholder board support, Lee currently serves an appointment on the Warren County Local Advisory Committee on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. An avid outdoorsman from a young age, Lee enjoys hiking New Jersey's numerous beautiful trails and parks. Lee spends much of his recreation time camping, fishing, and kayaking with his family and friends around the region and the whole country, apparently. Lee and I were just talking about your vacation. So thank you, welcome. We can get right into it. I have a quick question, really, just starting from there. Where do you most, out of curiosity, where do you most enjoy your outdoor recreation? Are there specific places in New Jersey that you frequent? And what inspired you to get into this type of work?
So I just want to start by thanking you for having me this evening and hosting these events. This is truly a great time to talk about the environment, and I'm honestly looking forward to the discussion and questions y'all will be having for me. But to answer your question, if I'm thinking just like regionally, so I live in Warren County. So for me, I enjoy going to Jenny Jump. If you've ever been there, great hiking trail. It's a bit farther up north, but it's a great view if you can make it to the top. But I also enjoy going up into the highlands, hiking along the Muskie, local areas like that. So I'm Warren County through and through, but I truly enjoy it. And to answer your next question, how did I kind of get into this? Well, as you can see, I came out of the campaign world, cut my teeth there. But the reason I came over to this area or this sphere of work is because after the Hillary Clinton campaign, as we all know, her candidacy did not go well. Her campaign did not do well. So I wanted to get back into campaigning and using my skills to really be proactive. And one of the first things I heard from the Trump administration, his transition team, was that they were planning on cutting the EPA budget by 31%. So this really caused me to jump into action and go into advocacy where I could really use my campaign skills. And from there, LCV hired me in 2017 to lead their field work for the Green 17 campaign. And we did something that had never been done before. We made the environment a top 5 issue during both the primary and general elections of the gubernatorial race of 2017. And we did it through amazing work through hardworking volunteers, an amazing staff team working on communications, and of course, the great work of our, at the time, campaign manager, Seth Levin. So from there, my role with LCV kind of evolved. It's funny because it was only supposed to be for a year. It was a year-long grant-funded position. I ended up I'm now going on for 5 years at the organization, where I now handle the environmental justice policy on the state level, working with legislators on issues such as giving testimony and input on the cumulative impacts bill, helping to support our EJ partners that really took a wide and bold stance on pushing this legislation to become law for over 20 years. So providing support where I could. And then working on the municipal level with stormwater and flooding management. And that's actually how I really got to know Rachel and the great work that Water Spirit is doing and has done and will be doing. So that's kind of how I got into this work. So I kind of went from political campaigning into advocacy, a little bit into public office, and now I'm helping with policy and outreach.
Nice. We have fairly similar trajectories in that way. So that's really cool to know. Bringing it to the state and the work that we came together on. According to the Department of Agriculture, New Jersey is the most developed state in the nation. And so my question to you, especially for people who don't know, what is stormwater runoff? And is there funding to help divert stormwater runoff?
Yes, so that's an excellent question. So simply put, stormwater runoff is water in the form of rain, melted snow, anything like that that runs across impervious surfaces. When this happens, and because New Jersey has so much of it because we're so overdeveloped, it carries along with it all the pollutants into our sources of clean drinking water, our creeks, our rivers, anything like that. The most common substances that it tends to wash away with it are pesticides, fertilizers, litters, trash, things that get caught in storm drains, get washed into our sources of drinking water, and really can have a hampering effect on our recreation, tourism, economy, because when you're thinking of ecotourism, we're thinking of our dedicated streams and creeks that people love to convene in. But it's very hard to do that if you're dealing with algal blooms during the warm summer months because of high concentrations of pollutants going and washing into these bodies of water. So that's essentially what stormwater runoff is. And it's very prevalent in New Jersey because we're so overdeveloped, because we have so much asphalt, concrete, and other impervious surfaces that aren't absorbing all this water. So it's just going along the surfaces and it has to go somewhere. So it all washes down into our rivers and just has a terrible effect. And we're not even talking about the effect it has on fish and native plant species within these areas as well. So that's essentially what stormwater runoff is. And as far as legislation goes, in 2019, the Murphy administration actually did pass legislation to allow towns or municipalities to voluntarily enter into what we call a stormwater utility. And these are pretty much what I would call the wave of the future for stormwater funding, because currently we have to keep up with stormwater pollution, but that takes a lot of money. And currently what we have traditionally done for municipalities, they've either depended on grants, loans, or raising taxes to do this. And it's very costly because water infrastructure is one of the most expensive investments you can make. New Jersey alone for our water infrastructure would cost in the billions to replace. So you don't want to place that on the taxpayer. So we need sustainable, dedicated funding that can only be used for stormwater investments and funding. So that's what a stormwater utility essentially does, thanks to that law that Governor Murphy passed. And it's voluntary for a municipality to enter into. And we can go into more details about what does that entail, the process and all that, but essentially there are tools at municipalities reach that they can use to help combat and make the necessary improvements to invest in infrastructure to tackle stormwater pollution.
Yeah, that's a great introduction. Thank you. And yeah, there's another question. Just specifically, we're experiencing such extreme weather. We're all hearing the term climate emergency. So how does our changing climate affect the need for stormwater utilities? And if you could talk maybe more about what a stormwater utility would potentially fund as a solution, what would that look like?
Yes, definitely. So we are in a climate crisis. There's no denying that the science supports it. Every year we're experiencing more and more rainfall. And we have an outdated infrastructure in New Jersey dating back in some areas back to the 1800s. So it was never designed for this much burden on it. We see rising levels of sea rise. Being a coastal state, that's also affecting our shoreline municipalities. So not only are they getting hit with more rain and more snow, but they're also getting hit with more flooding from the ocean, more hurricanes, more frequent hurricanes. And it's all impacting our infrastructure that just was not designed to take it. You also have to take into account our most overburdened communities as well that have CSOs, combined sewage overflows, that are experiencing more outfalls because it has to deal with the rising amounts of water going down to sewage pipes, mixing with sewage, and then being put out into local creeks, which have detrimental health effects on the local residents. But that's a whole nother can of worms that we can go into as well. But focusing on essentially that, it's imperative that we start to become more climate resilient because of the threat of climate change, increasing water volumes in many of our urban areas, rural too and suburban. But that's why it's so important for us to make these investments now, and why stormwater utility is so crucial. Now, some of the things that it can cover or fund are very important, because a lot of the services that it can fund can actually be taken off of the municipal tax roll. So we can think of green spaces, the expansion of green spaces, urban gardens, urban and agricultural gardens, pervious surfaces. So converting a lot of open parking lots that may not be being used to more pervious surfaces that can absorb the water. This way it's not running off somewhere else. And then also using it to strengthen our sewage pipes and outflows, and even trying to work to get less and less CSOs offline too, which is a whole nother issue that we need to deal with. It can also be used for salaries for folks that need to clean the streets of litter, cleaning catch basins. It can be used to provide salaries for that. So you're also creating jobs as well. And also street sweeping and snow removal. So many people don't really relate this to a stormwater runoff issue, but it can be related to it because you are clearing the streets of snow and debris. So this is something you can take off the municipal tax roll, which means taxpayers now don't have to pay for that in that area, and you're just shifting it to this utility now. And it can come out cheaper in the long run, and we can go into the technicalities of that too. So through a feasibility study that would then determine whether you would actually save money or not. And in most cases, you would save money for the taxpayer.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that feasibility study can be done without a cost to the municipality, that it can be an initial step that municipalities can enter into, and just to understand what is out there and what potentially could be in play if they did go with the stormwater utility. And can you talk to, have any towns done that, and what are your thoughts on municipalities going that route?
So we're starting to see more and more municipalities exploring a feasibility study because the realities of climate change are becoming more and more prevalent every day. We are seeing cities like Camden now pursuing a stormwater utility feasibility study to see exactly what would the cost be associated to the municipality, the cost to the taxpayers, and all that, and also trying to come up with a rate of how you would want to charge big polluters, really, the folks that own the big parking lots. What does that really equate to, and how will it affect the stormwater utility fee collection as well? So we're seeing movement with that. Recently, Red Bank has passed a resolution to create I'm trying to remember the exact lingo here, create a exploratory committee on stormwater as well. So they're also considering the benefits of it on Red Bank as well. In Hoboken, as you may have seen in recent news, the council also accepted funds that could go towards funding a feasibility study. New Jersey LCV Education Fund also worked with our partners to donate, we're working to grant a significant amount of money towards their feasibility study to try to help with the burn of that. But the truth is, we're starting to see more and more towns become more interested in it, especially with the epidemic of COVID. It's starting to lessen up now, which means we're seeing less influence on the municipal budgets as well. Now, we don't know where COVID's going to be going within, the next couple of months, but towns do need to move forward on this very serious issue of stormwater and flooding.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I know in a recent meeting, I had heard, just days after a storm that flooding is occurring in certain places in New Jersey. And so how can people even notify, their municipality that this is happening, and where is it? Sort of what's the highest priority? It's just increasingly becoming a necessary task, right, for municipalities. So, of course, being that we have experience working with voters, it's true that residents, business owners, and nonprofit organizations will definitely question the need for another bill if they, have building space and have to add a fee. No one likes paying new fees. However, municipalities can win public support with extensive community involvement and educational outreach. And I know you and I have been doing some of that to inform folks about these specific tools that we're talking about tonight. So my question to you, and this is for my whole team: will voters support new fees for stormwater? Will they support this, do you think?
Well, I believe a stormwater utility is in voters' best interest. We talk about fees. As we know, water infrastructure investment isn't cheap. It's racking up into the billions of dollars, and that's just for New Jersey alone, just given how outdated our water infrastructure is. So it's a necessary reality that we need to address. And I would say that it's in the best interest of voters and residents, because in the long term, you can actually save money. Because when you look at a stormwater utility and who's really being who's really paying into this, it's really the big polluters. The folks that own the big lots of parking lots, the big areas of roofing, they're the ones really paying into this. So they're paying their fair share because they pollute the most. They're going to be paying the most. So the burn on taxpayers will be as minimized as possible because the real funding is coming from these big facilities. You also have to look into the fact that within a stormwater utility, nonprofits are not exempt. Usually they're exempt from paying property taxes, but for many municipalities that are looking for new ratables to address stormwater flooding, now nonprofits within towns would be able to contribute. If they own large parking lots, they will be able to contribute to that, which is why the fees for residents and voters would be significantly reduced. Now, a feasibility study would have to be conducted to see exactly what that looks like. But considering all these services that lost my tongue, that were once on the tax roll can now be shifted to the stormwater utility, it actually works out very well for the majority of people that are living in these municipalities, especially because these are people who are living everyday lives being flooded out of their homes, really, their basements being flooded in if they're at a low point below sea level. And we see a lot of that in Hoboken, for example, where it's actually below sea level. So many people living in certain areas of the city are seeing their basements being flooded out and really need relief. So these are investments for the future where voters and residents can really benefit long term.
Yeah, and I think that really, thank you so much. It's so true. And I hope that more and more people will become educated. And to that end, again, how are communities currently informed of this process of a stormwater utility and the importance of it with respect to their daily lives? And obviously they're seeing more of an effect here in the US with respect to climate change now. But yeah.
Yeah, so I truly think it comes down to community engagement, community education. When this was passed in 2019, it was really, the ball was really given to the municipalities to do with it as they wish, to how they want to educate their communities, how they want to educate their constituents. I think there's a real opportunity here for local councils, local EC boards, environmental commission boards, to really get involved and work with their community stakeholders. This could include businesses, churches, nonprofits, to get the word out that there's an opportunity for their town council to pass an ordinance to adopt a stormwater utility. Now, this isn't something that happens overnight. This takes time. First, like as we've been talking this entire time, a feasibility study is necessary to determine if it is truly a benefit for the town, and if so, how much is it going to be saving them? And then from there, they would have to do public outreach to educate the public on exactly what is a stormwater utility, how will it be a benefit to you? And this can be done in a series of public hearings hosted by town council to properly educate folks, because the last thing you want to do is change something up significantly and people don't understand exactly what they're paying into or how it benefits them. And I can definitely say, like, many of this will benefit a lot of the lower income communities, communities of color as well, because, and we can go into it too, but many of these neighborhoods are in flood prone areas. Depending on what municipality you live in, some are far more flood prone than others. But to answer the question, even, back to the question, it really comes down to municipalities, mayors, council people to help educate their communities, and how they want to do that is really up to them, because each community, each municipality is unique in its own special way, given the demographics of race, ethnicity, color, whether they have a higher rate of homeowners or renters. That's really in the municipality's control to determine the best way to perform education. But we also have organizations such as myself, my own New Jersey Conservation Voters Education Fund, that really can help with that outreach as well. And yes, I know that was a selfless plug right there, but we do have organizers on the ground that can assist with municipalities. So if we have any elected officials or appointed officials here today, feel free to reach out to me, because we can definitely help with that education work.
Absolutely. We love plugging what you're doing. And we want you to shine like the star that you are. Just again, I know you talked about combined sewer overflows, and I feel like we might have to get back to that. But just in terms of the agency level opportunities, like, sort of the bigger picture, such as the Department of Transportation, and you have a position on a housing authority. So I'm very interested in just hearing about how those agencies can really meet this critical moment. I've heard also in recent meetings, just, if this were more part and parcel of what these departments were privy to or working on, they have a lot of potential impact they could make.
Yes, definitely. And it's been a while since I served on my town's housing authority, so I got to try to remember all those times of the trainings and the classes I took. But yeah, so housing and transportation, these are major sectors, major industries that are affected by stormwater runoff. Obviously, there are significant populations that depend on these sectors. So we do need to make significant approaches to help them. Now, many housing authorities do rely on federal funding, honestly, through HUD. So that could be a collaborative partnership right there. But once again, it comes down to the municipal level. And I think a lot of this does focus on the effectiveness of town councils, mayors to communicate and make the fostering relationships that are needed to provide the education. The housing authorities, the local transportation units, they're all stakeholders in the communities. And when we look at it at a state level, I think we also have to take all that into account, because, like I said, New Jersey needs to become more climate resilient. And NJ Transit obviously is an influential part when we're talking about pollution in the forms of stormwater, emissions, noise, so many. So as I watch a train go by right now. But I think it's very important for us to keep an open dialogue with the governor's office as well, through our mayors, through our councils, and try to work on a municipal level to ensure that the communications between both the state legislators, so state representatives of these municipalities, are hearing from the local municipal level representatives, to make sure that the folks living in these municipalities are A, being heard, and B, have the proper funding needed to do what they need to do to make the connections of intersectionality between all these different industries, these departments, and we're working cohesively in one pathway forward.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for highlighting that. I've always felt, just in my own experience in working with government and seeing the opportunities in the Department of Transportation, it always seems to be still the case that there is a lot that can be done. And I think just being part and parcel of the dialogue is so important. So perhaps can you speak a little bit more about specifically your environmental justice lens and how you're partaking in dialogue and just bringing that perspective to all of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, as my title says, environmental justice policy manager, but that also doesn't mean I'm not in the communities talking with stakeholders as well. It's no secret that our low income communities and our communities of color are really feeling the flooding. Unfortunately, many of our neighborhoods, and this is in New Jersey, but this is not different from anywhere else in the nation, have suffered from systematic racism. And I'm talking about redlining. Many of these Black neighborhoods, many of these low income neighborhoods are in flood prone areas. They're in some of the oldest parts of municipalities, usually in the downtown area where a lot of this water comes down from uptown into downtown. If you're looking at redlining, many of these neighborhoods were based off the 1930s practices when redlining really got its start. And if you look at maps today, you can really see some parallels between the old maps and the neighborhoods now today. So when you're looking at businesses of color that are in these areas and they get hit with flooding, they're really getting hit with flooding. So that's an economic cost right there to our business leaders of color, and also the people that live there. Not to mention that many of these communities are also located near CSOs, combined sewage overflows, which means that there's also a health component too, because many of this raw sewage that's coming up from beneath, the ground from sewers is leaking into their streets, into the nearby creeks. So this also dampens their ability to have recreational access to their natural resources. And we see a lot of this, many of them are in North Jersey, Northeast Jersey, where it's highly industrialized, highly urbanized, overdeveloped. And then you also see a few in Central Jersey and some in South Jersey as well. But you can look at the maps, and many of these are located in low income communities and near communities of color. So that's really the intersectionality when you're looking at flooding and environmental justice and social justice. This is how it's really all tied together. So when we're looking to fund redevelopment projects and new infrastructure, we need to keep into account that these neighborhoods need to be prioritized because for so many years they've been forgotten and left behind. And we need to make sure that we're giving these local leaders the voice that they need and making sure that they are at the decision-making table, that, because they truly know what their constituents need, because they see it every day. I'm sure that many of these folks are walking literally, ankle, knee deep in floodwater because of just the outdated water infrastructure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it was so purposeful that was done that way, and we know this. And I know we're working on maps that really highlight redlining in addition to the most vulnerable to floods, and that's ongoing. I see Abby had a question. Abby, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. And thank you, Lee. I was curious, how can stormwater affect the quality of water that we drink? And if you could speak about that.
Yes, I could. So stormwater definitely can affect the quality of water that we drink, especially if your town relies on well water, because many of this can seep into the ground. And you have to make sure that your well water is constantly checked. But you have to make sure you know what you're checking for and understand what you're checking for too, because you don't need pesticides leaking into it. It can also be a danger too, because if you go swimming in one of these creeks, one of these rivers, you may not be drinking it necessarily like from your faucet, but if you're, swimming, it's going to go into your body through your mouth. If you're not aware of, the toxins being washed in, let's say an algal bloom, and you're going to a lake, well, there are serious health repercussions. So information is very important with that. I would say, yeah, and those are the main two off the top of my head, how it becomes an urgent effect to your public health if you were to drink, let's say pesticide infused water or fertilizer, something like that. It's just not safe for communities.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Abby.
Oh yeah. If I'm talking too much, just tell me.
No, please feel free. Yeah, no, feel free to take a drink as well. Yeah, just thinking about focusing on the actual, we're meeting with municipalities and they're learning about a utility and they're asking, is it expensive to get the utility up and running? What do you say to that question?
I mean, that's a very good question because that's usually their first question. I mean, the answer is, there are costs. There are also grants available that municipalities have to, do some research on. I know this because I work with many of the leadership in municipalities to, try my best to find the funding. New Jersey League of Conservation Voters Education Fund works with the Flood Defense New Jersey Coalition, which also provides grants to municipalities that are interested in funding feasibility studies. So we are very aware of the costs that are associated. And unfortunately for the larger municipalities, the cost for a feasibility study to get it started can be a little bit more. Fortunately, many of them do have funds to fund many of these feasibility studies. And with COVID finally starting to dissipate a little bit, it's not completely gone. We still need to be vigilant. But with that at least easing up a bit, it makes municipal leaders feel a little bit better, a bit more secure about making this investment, because you also have to remember it's an investment. So you're going to make more in the long run than you are initially. And a lot of people need to understand that. A lot of people do understand that. But yes, at the end of the day, there are costs associated with it, but it pays for itself in the long run.
Excellent. And I also know that looking at the entire town that you would be in charge of if you were a municipal leader and in charge of decision making, you would want to be able to have a map of all the impervious surface that would be affected. So is there a tool that municipalities can use to that end, so that work, which really has to be done again at the onset to see what the opportunity is that available to the public? Can we look at that?
Yeah, so not too long ago, underneath Governor Murphy's order, all municipalities had to update their long-term control plans, coming up with a plan on how they're going to handle stormwater. Funding can be part of that as well, how much green infrastructure, that kind of thing. Many towns have mapped out where their flood zones are, how much impervious surface they have, things like that. And all that would also be covered within the feasibility study that you'd be funding for a stormwater utility. So it's good information to have, and that's how many of these calculations are based off of, because once a feasibility study is done, you now have your municipality mapped out. You can now calculate that fee that based off of volume of stormwater coming off of your property. You can now figure that out and where it's pulling into. So then you can determine where you need to make municipal investments, whether it's on, I don't know, Main Street, 2nd Street, something like that, because there are certain areas in towns, municipalities that do flood far more often just because of how the infrastructure was built, where it's located, how old it is. So you're able to prioritize where the first initial investments have to go. But yes, back to the original question, yeah, flood mapping and mapping of impervious surface would be covered within a feasibility study, but underneath the long-term control plan, many of the I'm losing my tongue right now. Municipalities have completed that. So we'll see. I wish I could speak on behalf of all 565 municipalities, but you never know where they are right now.
Me too, and maybe we'll work on that this year. Just for people who want to feel empowered to do something but don't know what to do, what are some tips just for residents to limit their stormwater runoff around where they live?
So that's an excellent question. So there are quite a number of things you could do. One of the easiest things I would say is installing a rain barrel. This controls the amount of water that comes from your roof through your gutters, and rather than going out into the street or into your driveway, is collected in a rain barrel. So that's one way you can control the amount of runoff coming off your property. You can also replace much of your impervious surface with pervious surface, which is far friendlier, far more absorbent, and it's not going into the street as well. And then also planting more trees, starting a garden, expanding a garden, making sure that you're getting as much surface area of absorbing material as possible to control the increased amounts of rain coming from the sky, honestly. These things can actually, if your municipality were to adopt a stormwater utility, can actually affect the fee that you contribute, because the less you pollute, the less you contribute. So there are ways for both residents and big polluters to affect the amount that they would contribute into a stormwater utility just by polluting less. And you'll see that they'll actually be better community partners for doing that, because you're helping to clean up your community, you're helping to clean up your streets, and your nearby creeks and rivers.
Nice. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Lee? At this point, I'll open it up to everyone else. Thank you so much, Lee. This has been such a lively discussion, and you're so rich in knowledge and, of course, hope, which we all need for actually educating these municipalities and getting them to do something very proactive that can really make a difference.
Well, I learned from the best, Rachel. Thank you.
I'm blushing. Yeah, so does anyone else have any other questions at the moment? If not, I'm sure I'll have more.
And I can also add my contact info to the chat. So if you can't think of anything right now, you can always email me as well. So actually, let me chat that in, type that in there. So yeah, I just put my email in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I know with a lot of these, people don't have questions like right then, but then they'll, like, a day or two goes by, it's like, oh, now I got something, and then I get an email. So it's like, yeah.
Right, you really think about stormwater in your own space, and it really is a part of our daily life. Blair, do you have a question?
I can jump in a little bit. Before my question, I just want to say what a treat it is to invite Lee back to Water Spirit. I had the pleasure of hearing both Rachel and Lee speak on the topic of stormwater management and green infrastructure at a session of the Sustainable Red Bank series at the Red Bank Library. And it was such a wonderful discussion. We're so glad to invite Lee back, especially right after this good news was announced in Red Bank about this stormwater infrastructure exploratory commission that's being founded. Sorry, my cat just jumped on my lap. Water Spirit is headquartered just down the river from Red Bank, so we're all connected by the Navasink River. I know that here, we also have our own stormwater runoff concerns coming up with some of the farms. There's an elevated fecal coliform load in the river that Water Spirit, in coalition with the Rally for the Two Rivers, is working to monitor and improve. So this is a topic that's very close to this organization's heart. And so I'm so excited to hear about what I loved, how you called it the wave of the future, these stormwater utilities, and how they really are something that can be brought to each municipality. And I know that you were talking about this a little bit, but I'd love for you to highlight even a little bit more for people who are ready to catch this wave of the future and start talking about stormwater utilities in their own municipalities. What are your favorite resources that will help people take those first steps? And what are your favorite first steps that people should be taking to open this conversation?
So, and I should probably have had this link ready to go, and I could put it in the chat. As far as resources go, one of the favorite resources that I love using and love giving out to municipal leaders is through New Jersey Future, their Stormwater Utility Resource Center. It's a website that is fully equipped with everything that you would need to know, from processes of step-by-step timelines of what you would have to start with and where you should end, with legal, what is it called? Legal, let's say stories. There's a word for it, but yeah, legal stories of what other towns did, because remember, we're looking to adopt them now. We see towns moving forward, but there are over 40 other states that have already adopted stormwater utilities, and over 3,000 towns that are using them, if I have my numbers correct in my head. But it's not a new idea. It's something being used all over the country. So we have case studies. That's the word I was looking for, legal case studies of what other towns have done and shown their success stories. So this is also on the website as well. It debunks any myths regarding what a stormwater utility is and what it isn't, and facts and benefits. and plenty of technical tools from engineers far smarter than me, explaining exactly how volume metric fees work, and more examples of how residents can go about reducing their costs as well. So this is a one-stop fits-all resource center that I always recommend to anyone I'm speaking to, whether it's a mayor, a council person, or any decision maker on the municipal level.
Yes, it really is a one-stop shop. And we tried to demystify a lot of what is on that website through our conversation tonight. I know Lee just, again, really hammering home that people will not just be charged willy-nilly, just for the sake of it, but that there is a clear measurement and that this is not just a means to tax people. So I appreciate you highlighting that, and the connection to the algal blooms, because that is something that really is very much a phenomenon that is being experienced by people who live and recreate in Monmouth and Ocean counties in particular, where we're based.
Oh yes, definitely. And I mean, I remember when the algal blooms shut down Lake Opakcon. I believe it was 2 years ago. And they're still experiencing some of those there, but it had a major effect on the local businesses that depended on it. So we really do need to get control over these algal blooms, especially as the summers are getting hotter. The rain, flood runoff is increasing. Local towns really do need to take really a part in this, in reducing the runoff coming from their municipalities into these amazing bodies of water that are prominent in New Jersey.
Yeah, and I would echo that and encourage the Environmental Commission members in New Jersey, as well as the Green Team members, to really have these conversations, host us for conversations about it, so that we can get to the initial step of a feasibility study potentially more quickly than not, but that they should feel empowered really to get some information. It's really, it's extremely powerful to have that information. It's also helpful in terms of us grappling with the climate emergency, being able to have activities to do, funding for solutions. It's all there. It's just in need of people who have the will to make this a priority, and it has to be a priority. We're seeing that. We can't go to get our food or go to work in a flooded subway. It's just not feasible, and we're seeing this happening in China and Germany as well. So we're here and we're all experiencing this, as Blair had said, and you had said, we're all connected. And I hope that this dialogue will help foster more of those meetings going forward.
Oh yes, definitely. I'm sorry, I'm just pulling up some quick statistics just in case anyone had any other questions. So I'm still listening.
No worries. Yeah, I appreciate the statistics you were just rattling off. Just in terms of where stormwater utilities have been successful, just off the top of your head, can you think of what have residents noticed a difference? What is the benefit, the anecdotal benefits that businesses, residents, and just maybe even municipal leaders are experiencing?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, off the top of my head, some of the major benefits that towns are seeing obviously are cleaner waters. Living next to rivers, creeks like that, it really has an appealing effect on pride in communities. For the businesses, obviously it brings in more people, because if you are able to do recreational swimming, recreational fishing, folks from out of town want to come, they want to go swimming. Guess what? They're going to go visit, and the local businesses around, they're going to make purchases. And obviously businesses love this because it increases profit right then and there. It also helps control flooding. We're going to be seeing a lot less flooded basements, a lot less flooded businesses, because you're making the needed improvements of, replacing impervious surfaces of a parking lot that may have not been used in years, something like that. But this is really one of the commonalities amongst many of the towns that have implemented a stormwater utility. They see a benefit, and you're paying a fee, but it's going towards cleaner water for your kids. It's going for cleaner water for the next generation. So one day you can go fishing in that river next door that maybe you weren't able to before. Now, I'm not saying that stormwater utilities are the end all be all. It is one tool in a tool belt in a series that needs to be taken in order to make these communities more beautiful, more healthy, things like that. But given that it's a tool that has now been given to municipalities in 2019 on, it's a beneficial tool that we're going to need in the fight for more equitable communities that are facing higher rates of flooding because they're in a flood zone. Helping to make New Jersey more climate resilient as we're getting hit with more sea level rises, more hurricanes, more rain. You know, it's a tool that we're going to need moving forward. And it's going to be the base really for the higher end investments that our state's going to need to make us more, I would say, I don't want to say resilient again, because I've been saying it all night, but more of a contender against what we know is coming down the road. So that's why I would say stormwater utilities, we're seeing the benefits in these towns already. There's a reason we're seeing them pop up all around the country, because it works. And now we need to make New Jersey the next state to adopt it. So the real question isn't whether we will, the real question is who's going to be the first municipality to adopt it? Who's going to be the first one across the finish line? And then who will be the other 564 to follow? That's how I look at it.
Excellent. And yes, I appreciate that, especially with the Olympics going on and racing in my mind all the time. But yeah, I think that would be the best outcome of this conversation, is for that first domino to be pushed and then everyone else to follow. And I hope that we'll continue to work on this together. And I hope that we'll be able to do that in a way that meets the urgency of our climate emergency, especially for the young people today and future generations.
Definitely. And there's just one correction I just want to make to one of my statistics, because I was able to pull it up. So as of 2019, there were 1,716 stormwater utilities that had been formed in the United States. So obviously the number's gone up before, but that's the number we're looking at statewide. And we have over 40 states that have adopted a stormwater utility. So those are the numbers. I wasn't entirely sure. I was going off the top of my head, but I had to look at it because I knew, maybe let me give you something more specific. But yeah, it's a growing trend across the nation. So New Jersey, I truly feel, can be the next state to adopt one.
Yeah, I think it would be a smart move as well. And I don't know if you're looking also at, insurance and the flooding insurance piece of it, but I've been seeing out west that some insurance companies are removing properties from fire insurance because of where they actually are geographically. Can you talk about that at all? And taking this step ahead of that?
So I can't talk to that specifically, only because insurance is not my forte, but I can definitely state, like, with states that are really experiencing forest fires, we see them all the time on the West Coast with California, Idaho, Utah. It's another example of how climate change is really shifting the geographics of the world, of our nation, because it's just getting terrible. We're getting less rain in some areas, more rain in others. We're getting flooded out here, and then we're getting foliage in other areas becoming tinder for these massive fires that are taking days to put out. So it just goes to show that the effects of climate change are not only just real, but they're here and they're getting worse.
Well, with that, may we be so motivated to act in the best interest of Mother Earth going forward with every day that we have, as I know you do, and we do here at Water Spirit. Does anyone else at this time have questions for Lee?
I must have been better than I thought.
You did a really good job. And seeing none, we can wrap up. But I just wanted to thank you again, Lee, and everyone for coming, and everyone for viewing right now, wherever you are and whenever you're looking at this. We really appreciate your tuning in, and we hope that you'll take some of this information and take some action for your community wherever you are. And please do reach out to us for help. Thank you. Yay. Awesome job, Lee.
Thank you. And thank you again for having me and for everything that Water Spirit does.